Fu Wenduo raised both arms and blocked Snow White's attack. The sound of metal colliding was particularly harsh in the forest. At the same time, Tang Mo's group of 3 attacked from different directions. Andre roared and directly pulled out a big tree. The huge tree slammed into Snow White. The girl in the white dress moved cleverly and quickly landed on the trunk of the big tree. At the same time, 2 silver knives flew towards her from behind. Snow White showed a surprised expression. She jumped from the tree and avoided 2 butterfly knives. The silver knives quickly flew back into the hands of the baby-faced youth. Bai Ruiao smiled and placed with the knives, the 2 knives disappearing in his hands. No one knew when his next attack would be and where it would come from. On the other side, Tang Mo blocked Snow White's last exit. The dwarf's wooden cabin was located in an open area of the forest. Trees stretched high into the sky as 5 figures stood underneath them, as small as ants. Snow White was surrounded by 4 players. Rather than panicking, she looked at the 4 male players with great interest. There was a curious look in her eyes. The maiden touched her chin and suddenly clapped. I see. All of you came here because of my beauty. You are honored to be able to see the beautiful me. Tang Mo's eyes narrowed, his gaze firmly fixed on Snow White's body. In the encirclement, Snow White was seriously saying, the most famous stowaway Fu Wenduo, Tang Mo whom the circus leader deeply hates and Andre from Russia. She turned and looked at the baby-faced youth. Hehe, finally there is the disgusting man who stole my apple and made me sleep. Bai Ruiao blinked innocently. Beautiful princess, they are qualified enough to have their names called by you. Why am I so unfortunate? Snow White's lips curved as she sneered, looking at your appearance, you haven't finished eating my apple. Bai Ruiao told her, I only took a bite. It was really only one. Snow White was sorry. That's too bad. If you had eaten it then you would have helped me solve a problem. Now you haven't eaten it and it also made me fall asleep. After I woke up, you brought so many dirty and ugly men to my forest, wanting to trick me into eating an apple, Snow White scoffed angrily. The Black Tower knows that the thing I hate to eat the most is an apple. From the time of my birth to now, I have eaten no more than 5 apples. Fu Wenduo took something red from his sleeve and threw it straight behind him. Xiao Fu caught the apple and ran away into the forest. Snow White looked after him. That is the apple you just stole from my kitchen. Fu Wenduo placed his hands in his pocket and he gently touched something. He didn't answer Snow White's question. Among the 4 people, Bai Ruiao was particularly happy to communicate with Snow White. Beautiful princess, why don't you like apples? Snow White straightened at the question. Why should I like to eat apples? Eat that stupid-looking thing. Am I stupid? A beautiful woman would be more lovable if she is stupid. Snow White smiled at him. Are you saying I'm not beautiful enough? Bai Ruiao waved his hands. I didn't say that. Snow White stared at the baby-faced youth. Then she raised her feet and walked towards Bai Ruiao. She was just about to reach Bai Ruiao when Tang Mo suddenly shouted, Run! Bai Ruiao didn't hesitate to run away while the showed Snow White turned towards Tang Mo. She saw that behind him, Fu Wenduo raised his left hand and threw something silver. The object flew in a parabola through the air, falling straight towards where Snow White was standing. An ominous feeling filled them as everyone turned and fled, looking for a safe place to hide. The silver grenade landed on the ground and the air was quiet for a moment. The next moment, a shock wave swept over the ground and there was a loud explosion. The whole forest trembled at this moment. The ground shook and the trees were swallowed up in the horrible explosion. A fire blazed and dozens of trees were burnt. Smoke spread from the center of the explosion. As the remnants of the explosion disappeared, Tang Mo stood up from behind the boulder and stared carefully at the middle of the forest. He saw the thing in the center and his heart tightened. What is that? A bell-like laugh was heard. The whole forest loves me. The moment the voice was heard, a rustling sound appeared behind Tang Mo's body. He was quick to react but his body couldn't keep up with the speed of his brain. 3 thick vines tied around Tang Mo's legs, throwing him into the sky and smashing him down. It was very powerful and Tang Mo was easily lifted into the sky by it. As he landed, Tang Mo chanted a spell and quickly opened the small parasol. The small parasol absorbed most of the shock and Tang Mo landed stably. However, it wasn't over. The 3 vines were still tied around Tang Mo and they swung him into the air and then the ground. The same situation was happening to Fu Wenduo, Bai Ruiao, and Andre. The forest seemed to have its own thoughts. Once it found out that the 4 humans dared to harm the beautiful maiden with a bomb, they were furious. Bai Ruiao cut at the vines with a butterfly knife. He was the first to land and threw his 2 butterfly knives. The 2 knives cut the vines tying Tang Mo and Andre while Fu Wenduo broke free of the vines himself. Once the 4 of them were safe, they glanced at each other and attacked Snow White together. The 7 dwarves said that Snow White was omnipotent and she was the favorite of the Black Tower. This didn't mean that Snow White knew everything. She knew the abilities and props of the players. The moment Andre pulled up 2 trees, Snow White was prepared and quickly hid. As Fu Wenduo used his black weapon to cut the vines and rushed at her, she smiled softly, I am so scared. Do you really want to kill such a lovely me? The 2 big trees blocked Snow White's body, not letting Fu Wenduo attack her. Snow White's actual ability was below the Queen of Hearts. If the 4 players joined hands, they should be able to subdue her. However, the forest was her helper. She understood the abilities and props of each player. Tang Mo's abilities were almost useless in this forest. If he used the Return My Grandfather ability, Snow White discovered it and grasped the direction of the ability, easily avoiding it. Tang Mo used the draw a circle to curse you, but before he finished drawing the circle, Snow White threw a weapon and disrupted Tang Mo's circle. As long as you don't draw that circle, you can't curse me. I know. The maiden winked playfully. Tang Mo's eyes narrowed and he took out the big match. It doesn't matter if you know the abilities and prop if you can't escape. The four people attacked together and blocked Snow White's retreat. Tang Mo constantly sought opportunities to set her on fire. He wanted to ignite Snow White and activate the rule of causality. As long as the flames were lit, they were impossible to extinguish. Therefore, as long as Tang Mo lit up a big tree, he could burn the whole forest. However, the trees were extremely cunning. Tang Mo worked hard to ignite a small tree, only for the tree to actively cut off the burnt part. Thanks to the forest, Tang Mo's group found it hard to defeat Snow White, but they gradually gained the upper hand. At this time, the light was becoming dim. The sun fell below the horizon and the moon rose from the eastern sky. As the last rays of the sun stopped hitting the earth, Snow White suddenly stopped. Tang Mo suddenly felt uneasy. Fu Wenduo's reaction was one step faster as he pulled Tang Mo's arm to run. The four of them fled at the fastest speed. At this time, the maiden slowly turned, a malicious smile on it. Sorry, now, it is my time to hunt. The next second, Snow White kicked off from the ground and rushed to the four of them. Tang Mo shouted, she is faster than before. Andre escaped a blow and saw Snow White's fist cause 3 trees to fall down. Her strength is greater. Tang Mo's eyes filled with tension. The game rules, night is the time when Snow White hunts players. Who would think that at night, Snow White's strength would actually double? As they saw Snow White getting closer and closer, Fu Wenduo pulled out a grenade from his pocket and threw it. Snow White knew the information of all the props they had used. At this time, the user of a human-created weapon was better than a black tower prop. Sure enough, Snow White stopped warily when she saw the strange weapon. She set off again after it exploded, but Tang Mo's group had already run away. In the dark forest, the cries of small birds were heard. Faint footsteps echoed through the forest. Snow White hummed a song while searching for the 4 players, a gentle smile on her face. Human, why don't you come out and play with me? I like to play with humans. Oh, don't you like to play with me? After running away, Tang Mo and Fu Wenduo had split up from Bai Ruiao and Andre. Tang Mo's back was tightly attached to a huge stone and he could hear Snow White's footsteps less than 20 meters away. Tang Mo held his breath and looked at Fu Wenduo. How much was it? Less than 50%. Snow White knew the abilities of Tang Mo and Fu Wenduo as well as the props they had used. 4 players, this undoubtedly weakened them. Tang Mo was unable to use his abilities for surprise attacks and was weakened by more than 50%. Fu Wenduo whispered into Tang Mo's ears. There are 2 hours in the day. It had been 2 hours since they entered the game. According to the normal practice of the Black Tower, nighttime should be 2 hours. Tang Mo, hide. Fu Wenduo, okay. It was night and Snow White was strengthened while also receiving the protection of the forest. Tang Mo and Fu Wenduo's best choice was to wait for dawn.